Bubba Scrubba, Fantasy Sports Advice and Analysis, Volume 3, Episode 2. Mark, good morning, everybody. Continuing my series on the pre-training camp fantasy football review series. Today we're going to do the NFC East. Just as a reminder, it's my backstory. I've been watching the NFL continuously since 1984. I've been playing fantasy sports in one way, shape, or form, whether it be baseball, football, basketball, or now hockey, continuously since about 2002. And I've been the commissioner of my own football league in one way, shape, or form since the year 2008. In that league, we run a point per reception scoring. And so that's going to kind of inform my rankings or my analysis. First squad up is the dreaded Dallas Cowboys. So, first and foremost, they have obviously the super receiving duo. CeeDee Lamb is a bona fide first round pick, mid first round pick, maybe late first round pick if you're lucky. He's a no brainer pick. He's going to get 100 balls thrown his way. He's going to have 150 balls thrown his way. He's going to catch 100 balls. He's probably going to hit about 1,200, 1,300 yards. 8 touchdowns potentially, maybe more. It just depends. Obviously, capping his upside is his running mate, George Pickens, who I think is playing for a new contract this year. I mean, there's no guarantee that they're going to re-sign him, but he was a dominator last year. I mean, physically, this guy is a specimen. He does complement CD well. And so, again, he's probably Dallas in general, and we'll segue into Dak Prescott. Just to put a grade on Pickens, I would say he's probably a second round pick. If you get him sometime in the third round, you're doing really well. Segueing into the Cowboys' passing game is Dak Prescott, obviously. This guy is good for 4,000 yards a season so long as he's healthy. He's had a lot of injuries. He's coming off of an injury. But that being said, with the weapons that they have at their disposal at the receiver position, I mean, this guy is as good of a bet as any. And the thing about Dak is that you're not paying the premium. So you're getting a bona fide QB1, but you're paying, the price tag is what, eighth round, 10th round, maybe? I mean, this guy might be the 10th quarterback off the board, as, he's not necessarily like some hot name. I put him in kind of the same category as a Brock Purdy. Maybe Dak has more statistical overall raw statistical upside, but maybe a little less. The injury history is about the same, but make no mistake, the Cowboys are going to throw the ball a lot. Another weapon in the passing game is a dark horse, underrated tight end, which is Jake Ferguson. I mean, this guy had a great season last year. Maybe he's not as underrated as he was, but if you miss out on the top 3 or 4 tight ends, you could do a lot worse than Ferguson. You're going to spend a middle round pick on him, maybe 6th round, 7th round, something like that. Last but not least is the running game. Javonte Williams had a monster season last year, 10 touchdowns or something like that. Seemed like every time I looked at the ticker, this guy was scoring 2 touchdowns. That being said, he has had a lengthy injury history, although his age, he's in the prime of his career. The backups, in years past, I would say obviously there, you would try to handcuff this guy if you're going to draft him. He's definitely a legitimate RB2, or if you're getting him as an RB3, you're doing really well. The next team is the Washington. I'm not even going to call them their mascot. I'm just going to call them Washington Football Team. I will say that I think it was a huge mistake. I don't want to say it was a huge mistake when they moved on from their original name. I mean, obviously, societal pressure being what it is. That being said, I preferred them when they were just football team. And quite honestly, I think there's no better middle finger to Roger Goodell than to refuse to use a mascot, be the only team in the NFL that doesn't, and just call yourself football team. Anyway, overall, this offense is pretty lackluster. I feel as if that they've even lost pieces since last year. They have what I feel like is even less talent on the offensive side of the ball. Overall, usually in fantasy football, obviously running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends are going to be the first positions off of the board, depending on how good you are. And quarterback is more of an afterthought. That being said, in this particular situation, I think Jaden Daniels is by far and away their best overall player. His rookie season was obviously phenomenal, coming off a Heisman season at LSU. The uncanny throwing and running ability, the fact that this guy's pretty slight, but he was taking some big hits and still getting up. Well, I guess it caught up to him last year because he was injured almost the whole season. So we don't know which guy are we getting? Are we getting rookie year Jaden Daniels? We getting a Heisman Trophy rookie year Jaden Daniels? You getting last year's Jaden Daniels? Personally, I don't have a problem taking a risk and taking a flyer on this guy, but I mean you have to be pretty good elsewhere on your roster if you're going to draft him. If he does come back and round back into form, you got a home run on your hands. So you could do a lot worse, and this could be a viable strategy. Hell, I could even talk myself into this strategy. Build out your team. Watch everybody else take the Josh Allens and the Mahomes and et cetera, et cetera. This guy will just be kind of sitting around, I feel like. And if you could build out your team everywhere else and you get Jaden Daniels, and he is the rookie year Jaden Daniels, you have a league winner on your hand. As far as everybody else, I mean, I've never been really that high on guys like Terry McLaurin or even Luke McCaffrey, who I guess now is going to step into a starting position. They're decent players. And then McLaurin could, you could get him in the 5th round or the 6th round or something like that, and he could turn in 2nd round value potentially, especially if Daniels does come back this year. But I think it's a big ask. I mean, I've never been a big fan of this guy's game. I don't think he's ever really had a season that justified, taking him as a wide receiver 1, if not a wide receiver 2. This guy's a wide receiver 3 or maybe even a 4. As far as the running backs are concerned, so this Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, or who they call him Bill, he was a 6th round pick in the previous year's draft. I don't think he showed particularly well. He had a little stretch where he was doing okay, but at a 6th round price tag in the draft, you know that you're not getting elite athleticism or upside from that position. They did go out and make an interesting move getting Rachaad White, formerly of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I like Rachaad White. I'm not sure how he fits into this offense. You're not drafting him as, obviously he's not a very good runner, but he's a good receiver. He's good in pass pro. He's going to be on the field probably quite a bit. So as a, a running back 4, potentially just a dump off guy who could catch 60 passes or 70 passes, you could probably do a lot worse, and you're not going to have to pay a very high price for him. Next up is the Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously, this is a juggernaut team, maybe not quite as formidable as years past now that they've traded A.J. Brown. The whole thing kind of starts, as far as fantasy picks are concerned, the whole thing starts and ends with Saquon Barkley. He's a 1st round pick or an early 2nd round pick. He had the monster season 2 years ago. Of course, it was going to be a tall ask, just like Jamar Chase. Come off of a Triple Crown season, you're not going to back it up with another Triple Crown season. That being said, now you get the dead cat bounce potentially. So you get the high, you get a little bit low. Maybe he comes back up again. Maybe not as good as 2 years ago, but again, I say this a lot, you could do a lot worse, especially on Philadelphia, who is going to be efficient running the ball, that has a good offensive line and is committed to running the ball and also gets catches. More interesting now is Devontae Smith, who was always playing kind of second fiddle to AJ. And for stretches, would look like a wide receiver 1, but then AJ would complain, and so he kind of fade off as they force-fed the ball to AJ. He is now the clear-cut number 1 in this offense. I have no problems drafting this guy as a wide receiver 2. That being said, I will say that we're going to see now that AJ is not there to take the heat off of him. How will he deal with constant double coverage, over the top help, etc.? He is a wily enough and silky enough receiver that I think that he could probably somehow compensate for that. But until we see it in game action, we just don't know. That being said, I think he's a legitimate wide receiver 2. Even more interesting is this rookie that they drafted, Mekhi Lemon from USC. When I was watching USC last year, I mean, this guy, I never watched any full games, but when I would watch their games for stretches, this guy was catching everything. I mean, he has an uncanny knack of just getting open. There's something about his game that I really like. Obviously, the Eagles liked him. That being said, he's a little undersized. So Devontae and him I think we're about 5'10", 5'11". So you're not going to have this prototypical 6'4" guy, that's going to be able to go up and win 50-50 balls, whether it's on the boundary or in the end zone. But as far as getting open and making tough catches, this guy showed that he could do that against big time coverage in the Big Ten last year. And so I have no problems taking a flyer on this guy. Obviously, you don't want to overpay for him because you have no idea what his role in the offense is going to be. And they also brought in this Dontavian Wicks from Green Bay, who, over the course of the last couple of seasons did flash, never got that extended opportunity. So I'm wondering if this is going to be an actual true kind of training camp battle where, whoever doesn't win is going to get kicked inside to the slot, or will be just a straight backup. So that will be an interesting training camp battle to watch. Obviously, more to come on this video series as we get into training camp and we get into the preseason games to see how that shakes out. Are they going to play, have a lot of 3 wide receiver sets if they all are, excelling? Time will tell. Last but not least is Jalen Hurts. Obviously, you know what you're getting with him with the tush push. He's not going to blow you away with his passing game. Obviously, losing AJ, losing such a big target might actually hinder him in the passing game a little bit, but I think the receivers are good enough that that's not going to expose him, and he's just going to get tons of rushing touchdowns. So he's a top 5 player on the board. I had him last year. He was perfectly acceptable for me and carried me for small stretches last year, and I think he'll do the same again this year. Last, and let's just say least, are the New York Football Giants. Obviously, they have its new coach, John Harbaugh, who's been well established in Baltimore, but his organizational philosophy is really more as a defensive coach, grinding out games, not turning the ball over. That being said, the Giants do have some interesting pieces. Unfortunately, a lot of them are coming off of injury or just injury concerns in general. So first and foremost is Malik Neighbors. There's not much to say about this guy. I mean, from a physical standpoint, this guy is the real deal. He's got the size, he's got the speed. If he could stay healthy, he could be a breakout performer this year. That's the key, though, is staying healthy. I don't want to say people overpaid for him last year. He was a first round, early second round pick last year. You're going to get him for a discount. I think you're going to get him more maybe in the 3rd round or the 4th. If you could get this guy in the 4th round, I'm not saying that would happen, depending on how deep your draft is, 10 team, 12 team, whatever. You could get this guy in the 4th round. That's a steal. You gotta pull the trigger on that. He has that much raw talent, but you're rolling the dice on the injury thing, right? So let's just put him in the middle, somewhere in the 3rd round. He also has a couple of interesting receivers running with him, Darius Slayton and Darnell Mooney. Slayton was on the team last year. I think more of a possession guy. I'm not really too high on him as far as his fantasy prospects, especially considering the quarterback. We'll get into that in a minute. Mooney, had a decent season in Atlanta last year. Again, I think the quarterback play is going to kind of hold him back. And this is like the Philadelphia situation. Are they trying to figure out who the wide receiver 2 is on this team? And is this a true training camp battle, or do these guys already have defined roles? So we don't know. I don't think either of them is somebody you're going to lose sleep over about drafting or not drafting, although they could turn out to be some kind of an interesting, free agent guy maybe later in the year if they flash. At the running back position, you have this Cam Skattebo, who obviously had kind of a stretch last year where he was dominating, but he suffered a gruesome injury. I mean, his foot was hanging off. I don't know. As a running back, I know modern medicine is so much better than it used to be. I just see some of these injuries and I just wonder how these guys can come back and still have the same moves that they did before. By all accounts, he's supposed to be ready for week 1, although, I guess they'll just have to wait and see how he reacts as far as training camp and the workload is concerned. Maybe he's a pup list guy. If he's a pup list guy, potentially he's a very interesting pick, because then you draft him as an injured guy, put him on an injured reserve slot if you have one of those in your league, and you wait for him to come back and see what you have. They also still have Tyrone Tracy, who, for fits and spurts shows like this guy could be a good player, but he just has not been consistent. I mean, he's a former 5th round pick. I think it was 3 years ago now. So again, they didn't use huge draft capital to bring him in. He doesn't have the elite traits like, some of these other guys that are bona fide top 10 pick at running back, like this Jeremiah Love, obviously. Um, Again, if Tracy's the only man standing at the end of training camp, as far as Scadaboo being injured, there isn't that many other interesting names on the depth chart. So as far as, just some nice depth on your team, maybe a running back three, uh, more probably better suited as a running back four. And you see what you have early in the season. Maybe he has a big game or two. Maybe you plug him in. Maybe he's your starter. Maybe he's your RB2 to start with, or maybe you use him as trade bait if he does start off strong. And then Scadaboo obviously cuts into the workload later in the year. That brings us to the quarterback, Jackson Dart. And I think that, it's an interesting segue because this guy will cap the running back's upside because of the fact that he is more of a running quarterback. Now, because of all the concussions he suffered last year, it's tough not to like this guy's game, but obviously they want him to be, to protect himself and not be so reckless with his body. But I don't think that you can take this completely out of his game. I think he's going to vulture a lot of touchdowns. He's a potential interesting backup quarterback if you build your team that way. I subscribe to the idea that, you have one solid quarterback and you can always go grab somebody on waivers if, somebody gets hurt or something like that. It's kind of a wasted roster spot in my opinion. But if you like having a backup, this guy's an interesting one because he's still young. We don't know what his ceiling is just yet. And I mean, he could blow the roof off of the league if all things go his way. That being said, it's a coin flip. Last but not least is going to be Isaiah Likely, the tight end, free agent tight end they brought in this year. Now, this guy was in Baltimore with Harbaugh. He did have a few big games. I think it was the beginning of last year, was the first game of last year or the year before. He had a huge, monstrous 2-touchdown game against Kansas City. And everybody thought, oh, well, this is this guy's coming out party. Didn't turn out to be that way because Mark Andrews was always there, and Lamar has always liked throwing it to Mark Andrews. That being said, Likely now as the standalone tight end one in New York is an interesting play. Another dark horse. This is like a Jake Ferguson last year. People know about Ferguson this year because he had a good season last year. Likely this year could be a supreme budget pick on somebody who has already got a top end tight end one and wants a nice backup, potentially as trade bait, or you're ignoring the position and you bring this guy in as a tight end one. He has a better than 50% chance of actually, going off for you. So that's my recap for the NFC East. We'll move on to the NFC North and the NFC South maybe next week. That being said, please, if you guys have any questions, put your, questions in the comments as far as, any kind of, guys that I'm not reviewing. It's not to say that I don't know who these guys are. I mean, these videos go on and on. Obviously, you could just go on forever. I could make a 20-minute video about one team if I wanted. But, or, just a philosophy on how to build your team, any general questions. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a nice weekend and see you soon.